Well, we all love it. Ladies and gentlemen, today I thought I would go through some behind the scenes photos from one of the greatest movies of all time, the 1997 James Cameron Titanic, and kind of give my little narration on what's going on with each scene. So, this first one, very interesting here. They're building, looks like some model trains. In front of the Titanic. This, I don't think, was ever used in the final scene because they did build a replica Titanic, half of one that was about 90% as big as the original. We're going to get to photos of that. But this scene in particular, I don't think they ever zoomed out far enough to scale it this far and show the trains around Belfast. But that is interesting. You can see that is the other side of the model that they built to 90% scale. They built one side of it. When they were filming the opening scene, they had to film everything backwards. So, like, all the signs were backwards because they had to flip the scene to make it historically accurate because it was only one side. The other side was completely hollowed out. They wanted to save money. There's a good image of James Cameron during, I'm guessing that's probably during the deleted scene where Lovejoy fights Jack. Very long scene that was obvious to cut. It almost turned it into like a James Bond thing with like Jack fighting Lovejoy. It was just dumb, but that's like one of those reception room chairs right before you reach the first class dining hall. That is them in the water. So that water was actually pretty cold. Obviously, it was not 28 degrees, which is famously how actually cold the water was when the Titanic sank. Kate Winslet got hypothermia during the filming of the movie. I don't think it was during that scene. It was another water scene. But yeah, the water was pretty cold. That's a sweet model. You'd think they would save that somewhere. You know, I did do a video on what happened to the Titanic set. Unfortunately, the big area, where they built one side of it, that was completely scrapped because the second it got water onto it, there was just nothing to it. There was nothing to support it. So it was basically ruined when they flooded the thing and they showed the scenes of it. As for this is a massive model. Look at the people to scale it, but you can see that was the scene where it was sticking way up. Funny enough, this very likely never happened. The Titanic never in real life got to an angle that severe. It was just done as kind of a nice little dramatic effect for the movie. That is the stern section. There's some good photos of the stern section and like the little green screen area. But yeah, they only when they were filming when Jack and Rose were on top of the ship, like on top of the rail because it was up at such a ridiculous angle. They only had the stern and it was on a swivel to where they swiveled it all the way up. That is a huge model of the bow. I would imagine this was used to replicate and get better images of the first few scenes of the movie when they were exploring it through the submarine. They probably got some images using this and it was like just better overall. You can see there's just debris floating in one of the pools that they used while they were filming when everyone was kind of in the water. That was probably after it. That is the first class dining scene. You can tell by their wardrobe, and that is kind of right before you enter the first class dining room. This is a pretty cool image because you can see all the chairs like floating to the top. I mean, this movie just had to be so fun to make. You're replicating flooding a famous, beautiful ship. How would that not be like the funnest thing to make? And you can even see those little light up, lamps on top of the tables for the first class. But that is the first class room. And that is probably also during the deleted scene that they completely cut out. They only took like one or two snippets of it. And the only snippets they took were just to depict the, silverware floating up, the glass floating up, whatever, to show how bad the sinking was getting. There are just some, it looks like breakaway windows on top of the first class grand staircase. And in this image, you can also see one of the little slits in between the grand staircase dome that, obviously was not captured in the final cut, but that was kind of an interesting thing there. But that just shows you kind of how the water, the angle the ship was at the time where they tilted the ship up to an angle. and kind of the way the water is pouring in. This was probably when Jack was in the Master-at-Arms office and Rose was coming down, and you can see kind of the flooded hallway where some of it is still not submerged in the water. That's how they got those scenes. So this is a good one. This is when they were spitting. Yeah, they're spitting into a parking lot, but it's pretty crazy when you put it into perspective like that. So there is the ship right there. That's just kind of a different angle. Of course, that is the opening scene of it. That is the stern, kind of how that whole thing operated. Almost looks like some type of motor under it. Obviously, it's not fully built. There is another nice image of the entire ship virtually submerged underwater and continues to flood as they bring it up to an angle. There's another image. Looks like that's Cal's lifeboat where he's pushing people off. And maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but yes, if you're in a situation like that, you do have to play dirty. They will 1000% swamp the boat, and they will sink the boat. And it's no fault of their own. They're trying to get in, and I understand that. But if you want to keep that thing above water, you got to push people off of it. That's the only way. Otherwise, that boat would be completely swamped. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion. All right, this is the band. You can see the camera right behind them. That's just kind of another angle. And there they are. That's like right after the scene ended. They're just awkwardly standing there as water hits them. That was pretty funny. This is another scene. You can see the ship right there, probably somewhere right after the iceberg hit because it's really late at night, but before the ship actually starts to show at an angle. There's another image of the stern all the way up vertically. And then these are just kind of a few cool close-up shots of the portholes. You know, it's interesting because we don't have the Titanic 2, the original Titanic in 1912. This is like the only thing that we have in comparison to like looking at something through modern. I'm not going to say this is HD quality, but it's better quality than we had during the original Titanic. That's a beautiful image of it. So that's 90% of what the Titanic was, and that's what it kind of looks like at night. Yes, it is completely hollow, but when you're looking at it from this perspective, it does look like, you know, the Titanic in 1997 with all the portholes lit up. It's just a cool visual. This is kind of the artificial pool that they built right next to a beach, and you can see the ship up at a certain angle right there. That's another image of it right next to the beach and the water. Very crazy contrast in terms of that. And then this is the CGI. So there is a scene where there is some really horrible CGI, and it's not a big deal because you're going to have that. It's a movie in 1997. It is what it is. But when Captain Smith says, "Take her to sea, Mr. Murdoch," you can see, especially if you're watching in 4K or 60 FPS, the people on the ship as they zoom into the ship and kind of come over it in an aerial view. If you have Netflix, you can watch the movie, you'll see this. It's brutal. If you zoom into the people and you see how they move, it is not good. But that's kind of like the only really horrible scene in terms of that. This is kind of like the first scene of the water or the iceberg opening the water in the cargo hold. Those two dudes go look for Jack and Rose down, and that's when the water comes in. And they're like the first victims of the movie. There's James Cameron peering through the open little slit in the grand staircase dome. That's just another image of the grand staircase. Ooh, that's a little exterior image of it. You can see they don't even have that, you know, wall built up at that point. I'm guessing it never was. That is water being dumped into the grand staircase, breaking through it to try and replicate 100% what happened in real life. I do think it's semi-accurate. The only thing I think they got wrong was the angle of it. So, in my opinion, yes, water probably did break through the grand staircase, but I don't think it created a massive waterfall effect. I'm guessing the grand staircase already had a bunch of water in it at that point, and it wouldn't have been like this crazy waterfall pouring on top of it. It still would have created an effect that was similar to it. So this is a good, really good image in context. So you can see that is the grand staircase after they flooded it. It is breaking away. The thing broke. If you're wondering why didn't they save the grand staircase, it literally broke, and that created the whole idea. There's a hole in the grand staircase. There's nothing left of it in terms of the wreck. Maybe this is what happened in real life. I think it's 50-50. I also think there's a chance that the grand staircase, just while the bow was going down, it somehow got separated, but this also could have been it as well, because you can see it right there just broken completely off. You can see this is a little two pieces of the ship, like looking right in between there. It's just all hollow. There's nothing to it. There's no rooms. It was like an exterior visualization, and it's very important that they did that, because if you look at other Titanic movies, you know, like Titanic 2, like Titanic 666, you know, listen, they're classics. Oh, yeah, they're great movies, but no, I mean, they're horrible because there's just no creation. They do everything CGI and it's terrible, but that is just a cool picture right there as well. So those are just some fun behind the scene pictures of Titanic. I'm sure there's so many more. I would be interested to see like the third class areas flooding and kind of how they did all those scenes. But those are cool pictures. Guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.